vitamin D has some similarities with vitamin A, but the biggest similarity is it's also a fat-soluble vitamin. Now, as we look at that group of foods, we can see we're narrowing it down a little bit more. So there's less vitamin D in foods than there is, say, vitamin B and vitamin C in foods. So the variety of foods starts to get a little bit restricted here. Now, vitamin D is complicated. Okay, it's had a renaissance in the last 10 years. There was a time where your patients would bring their pathology tests in and the doctor would conclude that, say this 50-year-old woman was menopausal, they must be on calcium then for the rest of their life. And then 10 years ago, we had the pathology tests will come back and they stopped saying that. And they started saying this person has to be on vitamin D for the rest of their life. So I think medicine, to its credit, is becoming more aware of how vitamins really work. It's not so easy to say to a woman, okay, you're menopausal now, you've got low estrogen, just take calcium for the rest of your life. The only thing that's going to happen there is they're going to turn to concrete. So it's much better now that the advice is take vitamin D, because vitamin D, and we'll explain why in a minute, helps calcium get into the bone. And that's the most important bit. You don't want to just take calcium and it goes nowhere. You end up with calcifications. Vitamin D is a transportating hormone that gets calcium into the bone. So it is a better idea. You really need both, but it's a better idea. It's still not as simple as that, but we're heading in the right direction. Vitamin D is not normally an essential nutrient. So we don't necessarily have to eat it. We can make it from sunlight if we have cholesterol in our skin. So we've got different forms. We've got the natural form that we have in our body. We can supplement it. And then we have the activated form in our body. So there are 3 different types. We have vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol. Now that is from animal foods or supplements. So we either eat it in butter or we take it as a supplement because our doctor's given it to us. Then we have plant sources, and there are a few. Some of the greens have a little bit of vitamin D. Some of the leafy veggies have a little bit of vitamin D, not a lot. And then we have the active form in the body. So when it's all ready to go and it's been created in the body, it's called calcitriol. So this is the activated vitamin D form, and it acts like a hormone in the body. And that sounds like a multiple choice question in an exam. Is calcitriol a hormone, or is it something else in the body? Now, vitamin D is biologically not active until it gets activated in the kidneys. So the kidneys are the final organ that says, right, vitamin D, now your calcitriol, you're ready to go. So there's a little bit of vitamin D in mushrooms, and what's really interesting about mushrooms is mushrooms grow in the dark without any sunlight. That's some irony there. We've got vitamin D in some fish. The only reason why it's in margarine is that margarine has to have similar amounts of certain vitamins as butter does. Now, butter's not on the list, but butter is a source of vitamin D, but margarine would have to have it added. We've got chicken, pork, egg, milk, and breast milk. Now, there was a case in Austria that really disturbed me about 10 years ago about a man who kept his daughter underground in a dungeon, and she had 5 children in the dungeon. And I was always curious to know how you survive. How do you survive in a dungeon for 24 years without any sunlight? And in those days, I think we all just thought vitamin D was activated in the body through sunlight. But actually, if there's no sunlight and you are in a dungeon, you can eat some vitamin D. It's not going to be enough. It's never going to be enough, but it may be enough to survive. So if you are kept in a dungeon, hopefully you're given milk, eggs, meat, maybe even some fish if you're lucky. But that case always plagued me as to, at that time, how do you survive? But then I realized that, even canned sardines are going to have a little bit of vitamin A in them. Recommended daily intake. Now, vitamin D is also a fat-soluble vitamin. So it's going to be measured in international units or micrograms. Now, 40 international units equals 1 microgram. We have upper limits here, but the therapeutic dose is 1,000 to 5,000 international units. And my rule of thumb, like most naturopaths, would be 1,000 international unit a day, which is 1 capsule of vitamin D. Now, I know integrative doctors use huge amounts of vitamin D in one go, so they will prescribe sometimes 25,000 international units once a week or once a month, and I have had those clients come in. Now, that is one way of prescribing. It's not my personal choice. I think to be able to absorb 25,000 international units in one go sounds great, but can the body process it properly? I doubt it very much. So you'd have to have a very, very good digestive system, gallbladder, liver, pancreas, to make that work for you. So my strategy is just a little bit every day. Okay, you don't want to overtax your digestive system unnecessarily, and I do think you could get into toxicity quite easily with those big doses. Vitamin D is stable with no losses by cooking and processing. So if you cook your barramundi, you're not going to lose your vitamin D. If you fry in butter or have hot milk in your latte, you're not going to lose the vitamin D. And this is a common thread in fat-soluble vitamins generally, that some of them are okay with cooking and processing, although vitamin E, no good. You can't cook vitamin E, full stop. Vitamin D requires no digestion. However, you need the assistance of bile, which is in the gallbladder. So even though you don't necessarily have to do anything fancy to vitamin D when you eat it, you do need the assistance of bile to get into the gut. 50% of dietary vitamin D is absorbed, and it's most rapid in the duodenum and the jejunum. Now, it's a little bit complicated, vitamin D, so let's go over to the right column here. It's not as easy as vitamin D, like some people think vitamin D is coming out of the sun and it's going into our body. It's not like that at all. The sunlight activates us to make vitamin D. Okay, it's a bit like cooking something on a stove. You need the heat to cook a cake. Likewise, you need the sun to create vitamin D for us. You need the sun to help us to make vitamin D. So in the skin, we have cholesterol in the skin. We have the first version of vitamin A called 7-dehydrocholesterol, made in the liver from cholesterol. So let's say it's cholesterol, to make it really simple. Cholesterol is converted into pre-vitamin D3 in the skin. So you've got this cholesterol in your skin, and when the ultraviolet light from the sun touches it, it gets converted to pre-vitamin D3, and then it gets converted to vitamin D3, all in the skin. Now, you could eat vitamin D3 or you can make it in your skin, one or the other. Most of it will come through your skin. You will eat a little bit. Now, when it's in the inactive vitamin D3 form, it will go to the liver, interestingly, back to the liver, and the liver will turn it into 25 hydroxy vitamin D3, and then it will go to the kidney. It's a long journey, and it will undergo another chemical process, and then it will be 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3. Now that is the active form, okay? And that is also known as calcitriol. So in that green box, in capitals, put calcitriol. Now this is not in an instant, okay? The pre-vitamin D3 going to the active form of D3 can happen over 2 or 3 days. So this is not in a flash. This takes a little bit of time, okay? So the active form calcitriol that leaves the kidney, that is the hormone that we call vitamin D, and it's then ready to go. Now, the hormone calcitriol, the active form of vitamin D, it will stimulate many things to happen in the body, particularly the calcium metabolism, whether you've got high calcium or low calcium. Now, this calcitriol works with the parathyroid hormone, so it will say to the intestines. So let's actually skip down here to step 5, an increase in blood calcitriol. So let's say the kidneys have just made lots of calcitriol. Then calcitriol will tell the intestines to increase the amount of calcium absorbed in the gut, okay? And then we increase the amount of calcium in the gut because calcitriol told us to do that, and we go back to the blood and the blood will monitor it. Now, if there's an increase of calcium in the blood, hopefully it goes into the bone over here. But we have this other regulating system here, the parathyroid gland, PTH. Parathyroid gland also tells the bone what to do. So we have calcitriol and parathyroid hormone working together to control calcium levels. Okay, so let's say, for example, the blood says we've got low blood calcium levels. Parathyroid says, okay, I tell you what, let's increase parathyroid gland, and that in turn will increase calcitriol levels, and then we've got calcium going into the bone. Okay. Now, just as a side here, the kidney's got 2 roles to play here. The kidney will be the last stage of vitamin A metabolism and create calcitriol, but it also in its own right will be stimulated to increase calcium reabsorption, or it will stop calcium absorption. So it's a gateway to say I'll let calcium out or I'll keep it in. So it's got 2 roles to play in vitamin D metabolism. So calcitriol is involved with bone development, metabolism and health. So it's involved in controlling calcium and phosphorus, and we always forget phosphorus. In the bone, calcium is attached to phosphorus as calcium phosphate. So we forget about that. It's not, your bone is not all calcium. So these calcium levels are regulated by the small intestine, kidney and the bone. They all work together to create a good amount of calcium in the blood and strong bones. Vitamin D is also important for cells proliferation and growth, like we said, children, pregnant women, gene expression, DNA. It enhances the death of normal cells. So don't want to say it prevents cancer necessarily, but it will create healthy cells. Now, when it comes to cervical dysplasia, cervical cancer, abnormal cells in the cervix, it's the first thing I think of is vitamin D. And I've heard plenty of practitioners say, my client had abnormal cervical cells, took vitamin D, next test, there were no abnormal cells. So it's definitely worth a go. You're given 3 goes at fixing your cervical abnormal cells. You don't have to be operated the first time. They watch your abnormal cells. The abnormal cells are just precursors of cancer. They're not yet cancer. So vitamin D is the go. It's important for your immune system, and very importantly, it may help suppress the immune system when we have autoimmunity or a hyperactive immune system. When we have underfunctioning immune system, overactive immune system. Also good for the brain, signaling in the brain, neuron production. For bone development, we have vitamin D preventing osteoporosis. It will activate and maintain osteoblasts and regulate osteoclasts. Now, osteoblasts and clasts, one builds, one breaks down. So there's a constant building and breaking down that goes on. So vitamin D is important to make healthy creation of bone. Important in pregnancy, improve bone mineralization during child's first 9 years. Now I want to point out here that bone is also teeth. Teeth are a type of bone. Your child's teeth are formed in utero. And that's the second teeth, first and second teeth born in utero. So when a baby is growing during pregnancy, its bones are developing. So that's why it's important that the mother has sunlight, vitamin D containing foods, and calcium during pregnancy. And for the elderly women, just bone density issues. Now, you don't necessarily have to have osteoporosis, but you might have low bone density. For the immune function, integrity and support, influenza prevention, it's good at decreasing inflammation. We don't know what it's going to do for COVID, but we do know that cod liver oil, which also has vitamin D in it, has vitamin A, vitamin D, was always used to prevent winter infections. We have it here for multiple sclerosis. Now, there's fantastic research on MS and sunlight exposure, and we do know that Tasmania has a much higher rate of multiple sclerosis than Queensland. And one advice I would give to every MS client is to move to a warmer climate where they have much more sun exposure. Then we have autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. So any illness where we have autoimmunity, and fibromyalgia's got great research with vitamin D. Autoimmunity can be calmed down with sun exposure and vitamin D supplementation. Oh, there we go. Where am I? Slide doesn't want to work. There we go. Cell differentiation, proliferation and growth. Now we're talking about skin here. So we're talking about psoriasis, eczema, keratosis, warts, and then cancers, the different cancers. So when it comes to skin, psoriasis and eczema are different. Now, psoriasis and eczema and keratosis can all look very, very similar, but psoriasis in particular responds incredibly well to vitamin D, and it's your number one number one supplement with a psoriasis case. You've got to get your client to take the shirt off all the time, go out in the sun, and every psoriasis client will say they're better in summer, and that is because of the vitamin D. But look, anyone with skin problems, check out their vitamin D levels.